At 5 p.m. on May 12, 2005, an 18-year-old college student named Simon Eng sat inside of his bedroom in the apartment he shared with his sister Sharon in New York City. Simon was supposed to be doing homework, but instead, he was doing something he loved, which was blogging. And he typically wrote about his self-improvement journey he was on. But because he kind of wanted to chronicle his journey so that in the future, when he was the best version of himself, he could look back and sort of see how far he had come. But on this particular day, Simon was not writing about self-improvement. Instead, he was blogging about something that was totally unusual for him. But Simon knew basically nobody read his blog, and so he wasn't really that concerned about writing something so off topic. So at about 5:05 p.m. when he was done with this very strange blog post, he didn't think twice. He just hit post. 5 hours later, at about 10 p.m., an NYPD detective, along with some other police officers and first responders, arrived at Simon and Sharon's apartment. They went inside and went straight to Simon's bedroom, and there they would find Simon. He was laying perfectly still on the ground, his feet were bound by duct tape, and he was covered in stab wounds. They rushed up to him to feel for a pulse, but very quickly they discovered he was dead. And then before they could even process what had happened here, they heard moaning coming from the other bedroom across the hall. And so they rushed in there and they would discover Simon's sister, Sharon. She also was covered in stab wounds and laying on the ground, but she was still alive. And so they tried to rush her to the hospital to try to save her life, but in transit, she would die before she could actually tell authorities what happened to her and her brother. For the next 3 days, investigators could not make sense of Simon and Sharon's murders. But then a detective discovered Simon's blog, and they found his final entry. And it was that very unusual post that Simon did. Right before Simon was killed, he wrote in his blog about what was actually happening in his apartment, like in real time. It says, quote, "Today has been weird. At 3, some guy ringed the bell. It was my sister's former boyfriend. He is still here right now. Hopefully, he will leave soon." Sharon's former boyfriend was a man named Jin Chung Lin. And a year earlier, he and Sharon had gone through a really rocky breakup. Now, Sharon had moved on and kind of gotten over the breakup, but Jin hadn't. He was still furious about the way things ended. And so he ultimately went to Sharon and Simon's apartment to get revenge. And his revenge was murdering the brother and sister. When police confronted Jin with information from Simon's blog post, he immediately confessed to the murders. Jin was tried and found guilty of the murders and sentenced to life in prison without parole. Today, Simon's blog is actually still available online, so you can go and see his final post.